Welcome to the week 7, day 1 video lecture. We will discuss short stories from around the globe. Now let's review everything that you see on screen, and by the end of the lecture, you'll have a better idea of your Project 2 thesis. Short form storytelling can be traced back to ancient legends, mythology, folklore, and fables found in communities all over the world. Some of these stories existed in written form, but many were passed down through oral traditions. By the 14th century, the most well-known stories included 1001 Nights. We're familiar with that story, and Canterbury Tales. It wasn't until the early 19th century that short story collections by individual authors appeared more regularly in print, such as the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, Edgar Allan Poe's Gothic fiction, and other modern short stories. Short stories come in all kinds of categories in terms of genre. There's popular types of short story, like what you see on the screen. In particular, flash fiction can be a story between 5 to 2,000 words, might lack traditional plot structure or character development. It can be characterized by a surprise or a twist of fate. Or there's the vignette, a descriptive scene or defining moment that does not contain a complete plot or narrative, but reveals an important detail about a character or idea. Some famous, or what you can call canon, short stories are listed on the screen. Oftentimes, short stories can be collected into a larger work, and on the screen is a list of some of the more famous, or again, canon works. The stories in the module may not all be considered canon, but in different ways they feature cultural significance. I'll start with Borders, written by Thomas King, a renowned Indigenous author and scholar. He even authored a graphic novel version of this story, which focuses on the experience of the Blackfoot tribe and their struggle to maintain their cultural heritage. The story challenges the notion of fixed national borders and questions the impact of marginalized communities. And we have When It Changed, authored by Joanna Russ, a prominent feminist science fiction writer. This short story is part of a larger collection titled The Female Man, and this particular story presents an all-female planet where gender roles are reversed. The story raises questions about the limitations imposed by gender and the potential for societal change. We also have The Comet from civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. The story depicts a catastrophic event where a comet threatens humanity's existence. Ultimately, the story focuses on the interactions between a Black man and a white woman as they navigate the aftermath. Lastly, we have The Family Supper from a renowned British author of Japanese descent. The story presents a Japanese family gathering for a traditional meal. The story explores cultural identity and the tension between tradition and modernity while raising questions about cultural assimilation, intergenerational conflicts, and the impact of societal changes. With any of the stories in the module, because for the homework you have to pick 2, you might consider how these works address important cultural, social, and identity-related issues as part of, I think it's Thursday and Sunday's homework that's asking you to look back at stories from the module. Now let's consider another possible way to analyze stories from this module or beyond with feminist literary criticism. This type of criticism seeks to examine and challenge gender roles, power dynamics, and the representation of gender in literature. This lens also questions the gendered norms prevalent in society. Sometimes we see it in smaller ways, like in The Comet, or in more prevalent ways, like in When It Changed. Key concepts in feminist literary criticism can include what you see on the screen. Specifically, intersectionality recognizes that gender intersects with other identities like race, class, sexuality, disability. These can influence how any gender experiences oppression or privilege. And representation examines how genders are portrayed in literature and challenges stereotypes, objectification, and limited characterizations. Consider this lens may help to uncover the ways in which gender influences storytelling, representation, and power structures. For instance, in The Family Supper, the story addresses the expectations placed on women within Japanese society, and Borders challenges our understanding of national borders and identity. How might this form of analysis, feminist criticism, connect with your definition of great world literature? I hope these questions invite you to delve deeper into the themes and ideas presented in these short stories. Literature has the power to spark conversations and inspire change, but is that enough to make it great, as we've explored throughout this class? Now we'll move on to discuss your thesis for Project 2. But first, the password on the screen relates to the day one assignment that asks for it. If you include the correct assignment, either highlighted, bolded, italicized, something so I can see it on the correct assignment, you can earn extra credit points. As a reminder, Project 2 is a multimodal presentation that can take the form of a visual and audio narrative video, a lot like this video lecture. Or you can choose a podcast and not worry about visuals. In the presentation, either visual or podcast format, you're choosing two fictional works from the course reading list, to compare and contrast. The template for everyone's presentation should follow what you see on the screen. You'll have two for your three subtopics. You'll pick two literary terms or story elements that unite or divide the stories. Your third subtopic should be your argument for how these two stories can be deemed great world literature. As part of your analysis in one of these subtopics, you're required to include a screen grab of primary research. We've talked at great length about primary research, practiced it in class, and how that could be integrated even into a podcast. In your analysis, you should also choose a form of literary criticism to frame your entire presentation. Now that you have an idea about your two stories and that you need primary research, a critical lens, and three subtopics, you have your ingredients to create a strong presentation and likewise a strong thesis statement. To start, you know that Project 2 is a compare and contrast presentation using the two stories you choose from the reading list of the course. Aside from that, choose to analyze these stories using a form of literary criticism. Think of this as a lens or a new way to view the stories. And like we discussed in class, there are common forms of literary criticism, and we've discussed them in class or in the video lectures. And then there's some other ones that you may have heard of or you want to use, and that's fine too. For example, with the more common lens of historical criticism, What kind of themes or subtopics would be most interesting to discuss throughout your presentation concerning your two chosen stories? Which literary terms or story elements would you review concerning these two stories? Equipped with your historical perspective, you could use the formula on the screen to construct a draft thesis statement. A sample thesis that used the formula is on the screen. Notice how the thesis is one succinct sentence, not two or three. It mentions the two story titles. You don't have to say the author names, that clunks things up. And it ends with a list of the three elements, three subtopics to review in the presentation. Now you're ready to draft your thesis statement. And once you've drafted it, review the formula once again. Does your thesis sentence follow the formula? Does the sentence consider other items like clarity, brevity, spelling, wording? With this thesis, you'll have finished part of your homework that's due Thursday. The academic reading assignment asks you also to include your draft thesis. And remember to complete the two assignments that are due this week before the due date and reach out with any questions.